Leah Simmons, a quietly thrifty 32-year-old financial analyst, endures lifelong family scorn for her frugal appearance. At an Easter brunch, Victoria, the showy sister who's always been favored, discovers Leah secretly owns $9 million from disciplined investing. The revelation collapses the family's assumptions, parents stunned, Victoria outraged and demanding. Leah exposes years of emotional contempt, walks away, and later builds a non-profit teaching financial literacy. Leah's revenge is living independently and generous on her own terms. Beginning, family brunch scene establishes class/appearance conflict. Leah's thrift store blouse and family mockery set the emotional baseline and world rules. Conflict. Discovery of Leah's investment statement escalates interpersonal and moral tensions, accusations, entitlement, and whether money obligates family. Climax. Heated dining room showdown where Leah refuses to be shamed into sharing her wealth as reparations for years of emotional abuse. She declares independence and leaves. End. Aftermath. Familial fallout, lawsuit attempt, embarrassment. Leah relocates, founds a non-profit, and revels quietly in living well and teaching others. Emotional revenge is dignity and purpose. The opening micro-humiliation, thrift store girl, instantly generates sympathy and stakes. The tactile moment when Victoria discovers the quarterly statement, the paper as a prop doubling as revealed truth, is visceral and cinematic. Leah's calm, precise explanation, how thriftiness led to wealth, flips expectations and rewards patient readers/viewers. The final door close, symbolic and resonant, is a clean emotional punctuation. Epilogue. Leah's non-profit adds moral payoff and long-term meaning. Relatable family dynamics, sibling rivalry, parental bias, performative success. Hidden success trope, the underdog secretly wins, is shareable and satisfying. Financial empowerment angle appeals broadly, especially to millennials/Gen Z navigating debt and appearance pressures. The neat, dramatic reveal, a number on paper, is visually and narratively meme-friendly. Themes of schadenfreude plus moral vindication often spread on social platforms. Some dialogue and beats lean into familiar tropes. Golden child versus quiet saver is common. Repetition. The script reiterates thrift versus spend several times without adding new insight each time. Parent motivations are thin, their sudden confusion and reversal feel underexplored. Leah's internal life before the reveal could use more texture, specific choices, sacrifices, tiny wins. The villain arc for Victoria becomes somewhat one-dimensional, greed lawsuit, without sympathetic layers. The legal route, hiring a lawyer quickly, is convenient plotty and could be tightened or shifted to emotional consequences. Deepen Leah, add small scenes/lines showing specific micro-investments, emotional costs, and personal rituals that built her wealth. This makes her agency more compelling. Humanize Victoria, give her a moment of vulnerability, e.g., concealed debt anxiety, insecurity about being judged, so conflict feels earned, not cartoonish. Parent complexity, show how parental fear/aspirations shaped each daughter, maybe a flash memory or line revealing why they valued appearances. Trim repetition, keep thrift versus spend motif but vary the metaphors and stakes, introduce a fresh metaphor or prop, not just clothes, to underline Leah's choices. Raise stakes beyond money, introduce a moral dilemma, an early scene where family needed help but assumed Leah couldn't. Leah's choice to help privately later explains her secrecy. Make the reveal cinematic, use sensory details, the paper's faint coffee ring, the sunlight on numbers, and beat structure to stretch the moment for maximum tension. Clarify timeline, make clear when Leah started investing, key wins, and why revealing later matters, e.g., upcoming family need or Victoria's leverage attempt. Adults 20 to 45, especially women facing economic/emotional pressures. Viewers who enjoy family drama, quiet success narratives, and financial empowerment content. Social media audiences, short reels, TikTok, who like vindication and twist reveals. The foyer smelled like lilies and lemon oil, a clean, deliberate scent meant to suggest money that never had to shout. Leah paused beneath the chandelier, feeling the way marble swallowed the sound of her heels. Her thrifted silk blouse caught the light and, for a second, she liked how it shimmered like a secret. Then Victoria's voice sliced across the air, "You're seriously wearing that?" The family performed itself around her like clockwork, mother smoothing napkins, father smelling the coffee as if it could validate their status, Victoria rehearsing anecdotes into perfect angles. Leah let her fingers trail across the banister, a small tactile habit that calmed her. She'd learned to stand at the edge of these rooms, visible but always misread. "Grandma's blouse," she said. It was true and false at once. The label inside had been torn out years ago. The truth of the fabric mattered less than what it implied. "It's vintage." "Oh, Leah," her mother said, with that voice that folded concern into correction. "We were hoping maybe you could borrow something from Victoria," her mother finished, like a script cue. Victoria, already adjusting a dress that cost more than Leah's rent, offered a practiced smile that burned. Leah's laugh was small. "I'm comfortable." Comfort, the name she gave herself for choices that looked odd to people who counted status in tags and receipts. Comfort meant a reliable Honda, a one-bedroom with sunlight, and a spreadsheet she opened at 2 a.m. to check compounding returns. It meant thrift stores where one person's discard was another person's fortune. It meant measuring value in years, not splurges. They asked the same questions every family ritual: what do you do? Who do you know? How much do you make? The answers were never the point. The point was the performance, an exchange of currency and validation. People left with impressions arranged like place settings. Leah sipped her mimosa and studied faces. Victoria performed the role of accomplished sister with effortless cruelty, a practiced narrative that hid how finely she balanced credit and appearances. Mom tilted her head and asked about Leah's work in that tone people use when they think they already know the boring version. "Investment analysis," Leah said. She could see the mental tally of her family, numbers but not enough sparkle. Outside, a child's laugh lifted from the yard. Inside, Victoria laughed too, loud, precise, designed to attract eyes. The morning hummed, plates clinked, conversation folded into its usual grooves. Leah loved these people, not the version of them that fitted her, but the way love sometimes looked like irritation and habit. When she excused herself, it was to breathe. In the hall, the light slanted differently. Her purse sat on the console, unremarkable, a soft dent where the zipper'd been left open. She liked to leave things casually available. It kept appearances tidy and rules unchallenged. A small, private life needn't be defended. She was careful in the way people who build quietly are, precise, patient, faithful to small increments. She had built a life in the margins, spare change folded into automatic transfers, leftover tips sent into index funds, birthday checks deposited instead of spent. It had been slow alchemy: watch your pennies, teach them to multiply. She thought about showing them someday, letting the numbers do the speaking. But there was also the older lesson: reveal too quickly and everyone reaches to claim what they never helped you build. So she kept the secret like a prayer, a soft burn in the chest. The hallway clock clicked, and when Leah re-entered, she found Victoria rifling through her purse as if entitlement were a right. The scene happened in beats: the purse, the paper, the sudden change of expression. Leah had known this face before. Curiosity curdled into ownership. She moved toward her sister, listening for the exact moment where private life meets public spectacle. Victoria's hand emerged with an investment statement between two fingers. The numbers weighted like truth. For a breath, the room was a held note, someone about to turn a key in a lock. "Leah," Victoria said, voice low. "What is this?" Leah recognized the weight behind the question: not just math, but possibility opened like a doorway everyone believed they had the right to walk through. Victoria's fingers trembled a little as she smoothed the paper, as though touching it could polish the reality into shape. The dining room pitch shifted, polite chatter thinned, spoons midair, an awkward silence pulling like tidewater. Leah saw the paper the way one notices a bruise, proof of pressure, of an impact. The figure at the bottom glowed in the way numbers do when they rewrite a life. Is this yours? Her mother's voice came like a thin ribbon of disbelief. Yes, Leah answered. The word settled. She'd rehearsed nothing, this was a truth that did not need dressing. It landed and transformed the room's geometry. Faces leaned in. Victoria's jaw worked, something originally schooled into performance now nakedly curious. How had she timed that? Leah looked at the people who'd known her longest and still refused to see her. They catalogued her thrift, they'd never catalogued her methods. They loved the version of her that fit their narrative, frugal, meek, someone who might need rescuing. The question of why quickly doubled into why didn't you tell us, and why didn't you help, and why keep it secret? Standard lines people use when surprise knocks over an assumed hierarchy. Their hurt carried entitlement like a cloak. Leah's answer began quietly, not as a lecture but as a map. Because once you treat me like a bank, you fit me into roles I never agreed to. Because I wanted to build without being beholden. Because small choices add up, $2 coffees not bought, rent split off into automatic transfers, every thrifted piece a deliberate choice to let money grow. She described, succinctly, the rituals, monthly transfers, employer matches, dividend reinvestment. She did not offer numbers beyond the one that had made the room into a courtroom. Instead she sketched scenes, the extra shifts she declined when the pay was bad but the time precious, the nights she read finance blogs instead of scrolling social feeds. She named the things that felt like faith, a spreadsheet, a financial advisor who taught her to be patient, the quiet joy of watching a small line bend upward. Victoria's face moved through a series of colors, incredulity, anger, then a sharp kind of calculation. So you've been hiding this while we worry, she asked. It wasn't accusation alone. There was also hurt that made people greedy, resentment at having been deceived into pity, and the sudden possibility of a solution to every pinch and fear. You never asked, Leah said simply. You assumed. You had the story you liked and you read me into it. Mom clutched at the table's edge, confused love rippling across her face. Dad, who'd once praised thriftiness as a virtue, looked undone by the cognitive mismatch between his values and the image that had formed. This was not just money, it was an inversion of the family ledger. The invisible debts of emotional labor were now in the open. Victoria's tone hardened into a sermon she'd practiced for social scenes. We're family. Family helps family. Don't you see what this could mean? For Mom and Dad, for me? Each word landed with theatrical weight. It was the old script, wealth, properly visible, becomes a moral obligation. Leah felt the room tilt but refused to give it the power to unbalance her. There was a quietness that came from knowing the math and the people. She'd thought of the two choices, reveal and get subsumed, or act quietly and keep agency. She chose agency. That did not make her uncaring. It made her wary. You've been sending them money? Mom asked, voice fragile. Leah nodded. Every month, she said. A retirement fund. Automatic deposits. The revelation reframed the accusation into an unexpected kindness that had gone unseen. Silence again, but this one was different, thick with recalculation. Victoria's outrage swelled in that silence, a sound that wanted to rewrite the day. She pivoted from hurt to attack with practiced ferocity. You could do more. You could do so much more. There it was, the entitlement turned policy. More, in Victoria's mouth, meant control. Leah realized the fight wasn't about fairness, it was a demand to rearrange the terms of attachment. The family wanted access, not equality. Leah's reply was soft but sharp. She would not be the ledger they used to balance their shame. She had given in small ways, she'd not signed away her autonomy. I will help, she said, but not on terms that make me the problem you fix. Her words reframed assistance as partnership, not penance. That afternoon the house felt different, the air charged with the knowledge that a quiet life could be a weapon or a salvation depending on who held it. Leah began to see the next moves with the clarity of someone who'd planned far harder than a single brunch could account for. The lawyer's card came like a splinter, neat type, a phone number, enough implied gravity to make Leah's chest tighten. Victoria hired counsel within a week, not to ask, but to stake a claim. Leah read the email exchange her sister accidentally left in a draft, phrases like family entitlement and constructive expectation. Victoria's argument was tidy: proximity equals obligation. Leah saw there the same logic that had justified the family's dismissals for decades, now weaponized into legal theory. If truth had been a quiet number on a statement, legality was a different animal, loud, procedural, and immune to nuance. The decision to consult a lawyer felt to Leah like an escalation that would require more than moral explanations. Victoria's hunger for validation had found its new language. When the summons arrived, it was small and sterile, a lawyer's voice translated into paper. Leah sat at her kitchen table, the late sun like a blade across the laminate, and read it. The suit alleged that years of deception had created a moral, if not legal, obligation. Leah's name, typed in black, looked foreign. She didn't panic. Panics, she'd learned, make people do expensive things. Instead, she cataloged, account ownership, dates, transfers to the parents she had documented in statements. Everything that could be proven about her choices was backed up by receipts and records. Leah was a creature of ledgers, a suit was just another set of documents. But the twist was less procedural than emotional. The community that had once murmured about Leah's thrift now had a new story: a woman hoarding riches. Neighbors who had once nodded with thin pity now folded their eyebrows into curiosity. Social capital shifted like quicksand. The family's friends who used to joke about Leah's style now sidled with questions and small, hungry smiles. Leah caught herself becoming a spectacle. The malign delight in Victoria's circle unsettled her. Where once her choices had been invisible, they were now center stage. It was a dizzying reversal. Pity had been tolerable because it required no action. Covetousness required a response. She thought of the young women at the nonprofit she had just launched, a mentorship program in the idea stage, not yet fully staffed, a cause born from late nights of spreadsheeting and coffee. These were women who believed thrift was shameful when really it could be armor. The sudden public attention was a threat and an opportunity. Leah realized the narrative could be hers to shape. Instead of retreating, she chose to speak in a truth that couldn't be court-summoned: a recorded interview with her mother and herself, a raw, home video where she explained why secrecy had been strategic. She outlined, plainly, how small structural choices, emergency funds, index funds, matched contributions, had built her position. The video didn't boast. It taught. It picked apart the idea that money done quietly was theft rather than prudence. The clip circulated wider than she expected. People shared it not as gossip but as a how-to, a practical manifesto for people tired of showing up in clothes that didn't mean what their finances did. Comments flooded in: skepticism, admiration, stories of similar quiet strategies. Leah's inbox filled with requests: can you mentor me? Can you show me a basic savings plan? A thread in a community forum labeled "Thrift to Freedom" racked up thousands of replies overnight. Victoria watched the momentum build like a weather front. She had hoped shame would force compliance. Instead, Leah's calm exposition reframed the story into a model. The fight Victoria wanted, a spectacle of indignation, slipped into the background as something more useful unfolded. Leah realized her power wasn't in the number alone, it was in the example. If people learned that discipline compounded into freedom, then appearance would matter less than choices. The midpoint, then, was not a courtroom but a public lesson. Leah's secret yielded not extortion but education. The pivot recalibrated stakes. It was no longer only about whether family would claim her money, it was about whether she would convert personal vindication into collective change. And Leah, who had always excelled at quiet increments, found herself suddenly in the work of multiplying ideas as well as interest. Calls came in waves. Victoria's lawyer drafted motions, the family's friends whispered and took sides, strangers wrote long, earnest messages asking to join Leah's fledgling program. Leah answered when she could, not to parry but to redirect. Her life now split into two columns, the private ledger of documents a lawyer could digest, and the public ledger of teaching, where each email was a seed. Dinner no longer felt like a ritual but a pending negotiation. Her parents texted cautiously, love with the tremor of someone who'd just discovered a new country inside their home. Their texts asked questions that tried to fold familiarity into the new map. How do you want us to spend this? Can we help Victoria? When can we visit? Leah felt the strain between wanting to hold them close and the truth that their affection had often required her to perform small humiliations. Victoria escalated in the only currency she knew, spectacle. She drafted an op-ed for the local paper about family responsibility, framed a fundraising pitch in the language of kinship, and made private calls to community donors whose names mattered in the right circles. Every time she opened her mouth she curated a narrative where Leah owed everyone for the discomfort of being misunderstood. Leah watched the moves as if they were chess pieces, understanding each optical gain and each risky reach. Leah's team, a small group of volunteers from her program and a cautious but competent attorney, prepared documents, press statements, and a plan for transparency. Leah had never liked being the center of attention, but she understood narrative power. She turned tools of spectacle into teaching tools. Instead of declining an interview, she scheduled a carefully framed conversation where she explained the math and named the emotional labor that had gone unacknowledged. The press meeting felt strange, lights, microphones, the mild adrenaline of public performance. Leah did not perform a reveal, she taught. She spoke of automatic transfers and compound interest the way others might recite a recipe. She explained how being thrifty was not deprivation but strategy, and how the language families use around money could freeze people into shame. As cameras recorded, Victoria moved through the crowd like a storm front, making small, dramatic pronouncements to reporters, family first and this has to be settled. But Leah's words snagged. People leaned into the lesson. Community leaders reached out, offering meeting spaces and partnerships. The non-profit's inbox filled with volunteers and small grants for workshops. The pressure from the legal front increased. Victoria filed a motion that was less about law and more about leverage, a demand for mediation and public accounting of how Leah had used her wealth. Leah's attorney warned that mediation could open private finances to public scrutiny. Leah weighed the cost. Mediation felt like a trap, an invitation to have her choices debated and repurposed. But refusing looked like hiding. She needed a solution that protected autonomy and honored accountability. She proposed a different route, a family meeting facilitated by a mediator but with strict boundaries defined by a prepared memorandum of understanding. It would be a conversation about values and expectations, not a ledger-driven auction. Leah offered to make public the assistance she had already provided and to draft a transparent charitable fund that would allow targeted help without turning family into dependents. The offer reframed generosity as structured partnership. Victoria rejected it publicly, calling Leah's proposal performative. Privately, the rejection was thin, legal bills, pride, and an image of entitlement that was hard to relinquish. But the public saw Leah's plan for accountability and structure, not surrender. The house where Easter had been fought now echoed the length of decisions. Leah felt the gravity of choice. Capitulation would mean acceptance of a script she had refused all her life. Standing at the window of her small apartment that night, watching the city lights blink on, she understood the climax wasn't only a shout in a dining room. It was the moment she would either trade autonomy for peace or invent a new definition of family help that preserved dignity. She rehearsed the words she would need, not angry, not defensive, but firm, principled, generous on her own terms. The mediation room smelled of citrus and formality. A round table, chairs arranged like a confessional, a neutral facilitator who said small things like "we're here to listen." Cameras were not allowed, though the rumor of public attention pulsed outside the glass. Every face at the table was known, every crease and mannerism catalogued across family history. Victoria arrived with a legal aid and the look of someone prepared to win an argument. Mom's hands trembled, Dad kept his eyes down. Leah sat deliberately quiet, a folder of documents at her side. She felt the gravity of being seen under sober lights, stripped of performance, now only subject to conversation. The mediator opened with a scripted soft voice and asked the family to speak sequentially. Victoria started, voice tight with hurt, laying out the narrative she'd practiced. Investment is community, wealth, when concentrated, is a responsibility. Her arguments were polished, and she looked at Leah with something like pain, a weaponized longing for what she believed family ought to provide. Leah listened. When her turn came, she did not recite spreadsheets. She told a story. She spoke about small decisions and the quiet years of discipline, yes, but she also named the cost, the parental jokes that became chains, the dinners where her choices were reduced to a punchline, friends who pitted without listening. She explained the calculus of dignity. Giving while preserving autonomy required boundaries, otherwise help becomes a contract where love is conditional. Victoria interrupted. Anger rose, not just about money but about image and control. You could have shared, she said. You could have saved us from this. Leah's voice did not tremble. You could have asked, she answered. You could have invited me into your problems without assuming I was charity. You could have treated my choices as valid. Her words landed with the force of accumulated truth. For 30 years she'd been catalogued, here she catalogued back. The mediator asked for proposals. Victoria demanded broad access, parents pleaded for security and help. Leah offered a concrete plan, a family fund administered externally for targeted needs, medical bills, mortgage emergency, education, coupled with a community financial literacy program run by her nonprofit with annual reports and independent oversight. The fund would not be a blank check to absolve responsibility, it would be a partnership, transparent and time-bound. Victoria's face flushed. You want rules attached to our need, she asked. I want dignity attached to our help, Leah replied. The room held a brittle silence. For a long moment, Leah's offer hung between them as both concession and boundary, generous, yes, but on terms that preserved personhood. Then Victoria made a choice that revealed more of herself than strategy. She stood up and accused Leah of coldness, of withholding for spite. Voices rose. The mediator tried to pull them back but struggled to insert calm where history spoke loudest. Victoria's outrage was a force, Leah's steadfastness was a different force. The turning moment arrived not when law was invoked but when Dad, who had folded his hands in decades of quiet, cleared his throat. He'd watched his daughters for 30 years, seen them fold and unfold into different versions of themselves. His voice cracked as he said, I always wanted to protect my girls. I never thought to ask who they wanted to be. That admission changed the energy. It was a small rupture in the family narrative, but a real one. Mom wept softly, more for regret than anger. Victoria's shoulders sagged as if the fight had been unearthed by grief. The mediator asked for a cooling-off period and to review Leah's fund proposal with independent counsel. No immediate agreement. No dramatic last-minute signing. Instead, a calibrated pause, a promise of process over a spectacle of quick fixes. Leah stood, feeling the air shift. The room had not been won, but something had changed. Her plan had reframed the narrative from taker versus giver to partner versus dependent. The climax was not a theatrical triumph but a moral pivot. Leah refused to be consumed by others' needs and, in doing so, forced a family to reconsider what help should look like. Outside, sunlight crept across the parking lot. Leah walked away not unscathed but unbowed. She had offered both generosity and boundaries. That balance was her victory. 6 months later, the non-profit's small logo sat on a mailer and on a whiteboard in a rented classroom where 30 women leaned forward to learn about interest and agency. Leah taught like she'd lived, methodically, patiently, and with an emphasis on the tiny rituals that built resilience. The room buzzed with practical hope, calculators, binders, questions that cut to the lived realities of paycheck timing and credit traps. The family drama had receded from headlines into local memory. Victoria's suit had dissolved into mediated agreements and a public relations lesson. She'd paid legal fees and learned the hard cost of weaponizing affection. Dad came to one workshop under a folded apology and stayed for the last half, eyes soft with new comprehension. Mom volunteered to bring coffee one Saturday, hands fumbling with thermoses and humility. Leah's life in Denver was quieter than the controversy had been, but fuller for the work. She signed off emails with a small line now: teach one person to save, you teach a lineage. The nonprofit's steering committee included women from multiple neighborhoods, an accountant who offered pro bono sessions, and a retired teacher who volunteered to run workshops for parents. Sometimes Leah still felt the sting of old jokes. A neighbor would comment on thrift store finds, or a cousin would joke about budgeting. Those barbs landed lighter now, like wind against glass. Leah had learned the strange alchemy of being wealthy enough to be indifferent. She could tolerate small slights without being consumed by them. Which made her kinder, not colder. Occasionally Victoria sent messages that alternated between thin apologies and transactional asks. Leah replied with boundaries and sometimes with offers: a referral to a counselor for financial stress, a suggestion for a budget planner. The lawyer bills had taught Victoria something about choices. Whether she would change was a path only she could walk. The nonprofit thrived quietly. Leah watched a graduate of their first cohort secure a stable job and send back a thank you note that began, "You taught me to stop apologizing for saving." Those words landed with a sweetness deeper than any headline. Leah felt a private gratitude for the work. It was a circular gift, the kind that returned value to the giver as well as the receiver. On a late autumn morning, Leah walked through a small park, sunlight spattered like coins across the path. She carried a thermos and a paperback. A child ran past, shirt askew, laughter like a bright coin. Leah smiled in a way that felt untroubled. She remembered the foyer, the lilies, the clink of brunch. She remembered the paper statement like an inciting incident in a life that had been otherwise ordinary. What had once been a secret weapon had become a public lesson, and in turning it outward she'd found a broader purpose. That sense of purpose did not erase loneliness or the complicated love of family. It reframed it. Leah still loved her parents and the sister who'd grown in the shadow of appearances. She recognized both the harm and the hunger inside Victoria, the part that wanted more than she could trust herself to ask for. She left the door open for reconnection but closed it on entitlement. Sometimes revenge is imagined as spectacle, a tall, theatrical moment. Leah's revenge, she realized, had been less theatrical. It was the deliberate, ongoing work of building a life that did not require permission. It was generosity wrapped in boundaries, teaching instead of buying, dignity instead of drama. She sat on a bench and opened her book. A woman sat next to her, hesitating, then asking quietly, "Do you have a minute? I need to learn where to start." Leah smiled and motioned to the empty space beside her. She closed the book, unfolded a pen, and began drawing the smallest, most crucial diagram, the curve of compound interest, starting at one small number and growing, patiently, into a horizon. Outside, the city moved on. Inside that small exchange, a quiet revolution kept unfolding, one incremental decision at a time.